Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. Well, friends, some of the major trends in the world right now are healthcare. We are in a golden age of healthcare, especially on the cardiovascular side. And the second is big data, and it's specifically big data analysis. We've been good for 5, 10 years of gathering this information, but via AI, we are at the age where we can interpret it and make clinical outcomes. And that's why I'm so happy today to be joined by EIQ, which is a company that is focused on these major mega trends and has a solution. And I'm joined by Dean Stridham and Jeff Strange, and they're going to explain all about the company and also, importantly, where the company is at in its life cycle, because it's really an interesting time. And with that introduction, fellows, welcome.
Thanks so much, Greg, for having us. We look forward to the conversation.
Great.
Thank you, Greg.
Hey, Jeff, I want to start with you. Businesses start with people. Just tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so look, I'm currently the professor in the School of Medicine at the University of Sydney. I'm also professor in the School of Medicine at the University of Notre Dame, senior academic lead at the Heart Research Institute here in Sydney, and as well as on staff at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. I created the database along with my colleagues from around the country to build a repository of big data. And my background really is both that academic, the clinical side of things, but also working the nuance between the clinical and the industry side of things. So I'm delighted to be able to help EIQ guide those pathways forward.
Right. And specifically getting into it. So what EIQ is trying to do, the problem it's trying to solve is, I think that we understand stenosis, which is narrowing of heart valves, is that right? But it's also interpretation and predictability of what to do with patients. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. What we've tried to do is to build an algorithm that not only detects but stratifies patients, so that we've got an ability to say that the patient in front of you is at a lower risk, a moderate or moderate risk of the severe end of the spectrum, and then the severe risk profile, to allow the clinical teams to be able to really direct traffic for the patient that's in front of them.
Right. And it's more than just a situation of how narrow is their opening right here, right now.
Yeah, Greg, I think that really kind of captures what the problem is right now, is that we've got a narrowing valve that's one parameter, one dimension. What we've tried to do is we've tried to build a multidimensional understanding of what's happening for the patient from what's known clinically as a phenotype, or the different coalescing variables that are associated with that disease. And in this case, the ventricle and the way that the heart responds, so the heart has 4 different chambers, and they all have different valves and different pressure gradients. And when you try and look at this 3-dimensional hemodynamic organ, from a 2-dimensional window, which is the way that we diagnose these kind of diseases on echocardiography, sometimes it's difficult to get that multidimensional view. And so what we've tried to do is take the power of that big data, use the enhancement of computational power to understand that multidimensional process, and give the clinical teams some decision support in getting the right patient to move across to the right place, if you like, in appropriate.
So this is said another way, instead of just having like an X axis and a Y axis where it's one factor, you do X, Y. This is more looking at the overall picture, interpreting that data to get those better outcomes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that key is the multidimensional interactive space, where one measurement doesn't tell you the complete picture of what's happening for the total response of the heart. And so what we're trying to do is bring all of those relational values together. And the exciting part about what EIQ are bringing to the market is that's all done within 3 seconds.
3 seconds.
3 seconds.
Okay, that truly sounds incredible. And this is the branded Salve product. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Dion, maybe you want to cover that.
No, that's absolutely correct, Jeff. Thanks, Greg, for that. So just for in the layman's terms, what we do is we automate the interpretation of the echo read. We do that faster than the human. We do that more accurate than the human, and remove all forms of bias, right? Unfortunately, there's still some bias. So no matter where you are, if you use this technology, you get the same outcome regardless, and you get a consistent outcome over and over and over. And we've proven this in multiple studies. It's just more accurate than the human.
Right. And Dion, the stage of the company, that's life cycle, can you just tell us where you stand right now?
Yes, so we've been doing what's called preceding the market up until now. We are about 6 to 8 weeks away. We've submitted to the FDA around about May, and so we're about 6 to 8 weeks away of getting FDA clearance, or we anticipate our FDA clearance from 6 to 8 weeks' time. And then following that, we obviously start the commercialization process. But I think it's important to know that we're not starting there from scratch. So what we have done is, as I said, we've got a seeding strategy in place. So we already signed some integration partnerships with a number of vendors, which means that once we get FDA clearance, it goes into hospitals where they are already in. The main one would be Image. We announced to the market a few weeks ago. And so what this allows us to do is to get the customers to use the product free of charge, post FDA clearance, get comfortable with it, get familiar with that. And our main go-to-market strategy is through reimbursement. So once we then get our reimbursement, that becomes a flick of a switch at our end, and the sites become revenue generating.
Right. And Dion, this is incredibly important because, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to say it, in the medical world right now, it's all well and good to have a great product or a great drug, but unless you can get commercialization and distribution, it just doesn't matter. And adding to that, it obviously starts way before you have the product. Can you just talk to us a little bit maybe about the advisory board and how it helps with the distribution strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very fortunate, and I'll let Jeff explain to you exactly who our advisory board are, but we're very fortunate that we've got literally the who's who of cardiology and AI in the US and in Europe that's supporting our technology. And the reason they're doing it, these are people that can really choose where they want to work or who they want to consult for, is because they fundamentally believe in what Professor Jeff Strange and his colleague Professor David Playford are doing. Is going to change the way that we diagnose structural heart disease. So based on that, they've started to join us. So they've really been instrumental in opening doors for us. I'll give you a perfect example. One of our advisory board members, Professor Jordan Strom, who's at Beth Israel Hospital, he's run a study for us. He presented the findings of this data last week at a conference called Cardiac Society of Australia, New Zealand. But he's also been supporting this in getting it into his facility, so we can get real-world evidence of how does this operate in the real world. And I've got a similar example at Baylor Scott and White in Texas, where this has been run over 230,000 echoes. And so our advisory board has been instrumental in not steering us scientifically or helping us with our insights there, but also helping us gain some commercial credibility.
Right. And for people that don't know, these people are what you would call influencers on Instagram, but in the medical world, and it's so important, obviously. Now, for either one of you, obviously this is a critical time, but can you just go into also a little bit about the revenue model that you're proposing? It's a SaaS model, is that?
Yes and no. Our real revenue model that we'll go to market with is a reimbursement model. So this is where the insurance companies reimburse the usage of the AI to interpret the echocardiogram. And so what it does, it's referred to as a frictionless sale in the US. So there's no outlay of capital from the hospital's perspective to use the technology. They actually generate revenue from using the technology because there's a reimbursement code. Now, just for full disclosure, that code doesn't cover everybody. It covers select groups to start off with from the insurance company. And then as you get more experience and more uptake, it expands to what's referred to as a CPT code. So Mr. Strange and his team have worked very diligently with our reimbursement consultants to put forward strong arguments as to why it should be reimbursed. And we're quietly confident that we'll achieve this. We know for a fact that we can get what's referred to as a miscellaneous code to start off with before it then goes into full commercial use post that.
Right. And is it the typical way it works is that the insurance companies, they'll wait, I assume you're having discussions already, but they wait for that FDA clearance before then they take it into the next stage of their, I guess, approval process?
Yes, that's correct. So they first wait, so it's sequential, right? So you first get your FDA clearance, and following that, because they want to see what claim you get, and following that, you get the reimbursement. But what they look for is there any need for this product or any demand for it? And as I said, we've had more than 300,000 use cases in the US already.
300,000.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So that's a huge market. And also, for people that don't know, this obviously the total addressable market here, it must be a multi-billion-dollar addressable market.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are important for your listeners to understand. In the United States, there's 30 million echocardiogram studies done every single year. It's a huge process of the diagnostics in cardiovascular medicine. In fact, echocardiography, which is the ultrasound of the heart in the way that we diagnose these diseases, it's the number one diagnostic tool for structural heart disease. So that really kind of puts a benchmark on where this sits in the diagnostic strategy for the cardiology world in understanding things like the valvular heart disease, aortic stenosis, as well as heart failure, which is something that we're moving towards at the moment. But specifically with the Medicare component of this and the target population, there's at least 5 million studies done directly for this disease, aortic stenosis. And Dion can refer to that in more detail around the market penetration that we expect in the short term.
Right. So big addressable market, big need. And also, I'm curious, as you're getting more and more data, are the AI models constantly being refined? So in theory, we should have even more accurate data?
So in the first case, the aortic stenosis model that we've designed that's currently in with the FDA, and we expect approval in the next kind of 6 to 8 weeks, that's a wrapped up model. So there's no further linear progression. In fact, the area under the receiver operating characteristic curve for how sensitive and how specific the diagnosis is with that particular algorithm is 0.986. And that's from a 0 to a 1, if you like. So basically, it's at the very top of the spectrum on sensitivity and specificity. So in fact, in that model, if we continue to train it, we may do what's called overfitting and therefore limit its ability. So we won't be doing any more training on that model. It's as good as it gets. There are other models that we're working on where we're starting to get more and more data to help them get more and more accurate. And so we've got two approaches. One is the models that are trained so well that they're almost perfect. Brilliant. That's what we're currently bringing to market. That's okay. Terrible thing to have happen. Then we've got the other models where you need to continually feed that with data. And really what we're finding is because we have so much data.
Yes.
And we're able to apply these new computation methodologies to such big data that the algorithm outputs are really close to as accurate as you can get them. So really been very positive up until now in the way that we've been training the data.
Yeah, and Jeff, and this is where it's so nice to be dealing in, I suppose, a data set that is big, where you have lots and lots of data, so you can get very, very accurate predictability. As we all know, when you're flipping a coin, it's a one-off, it's the worst possibility. But in this case here, where you have, as you said, 30 million studies done, 5 million targeted done, certainly you're going to get a lot of statistical significance there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in Australia where we've trained the algorithms, the first particular training algorithm was trained on more than 450,000 patients. I mean, this is really big data training and validated on more than 200,000 patients. So, in the big scheme of things, with regards to the clinical evidence generation, these are they're in the factors of hundreds of thousands more than the clinical evidence generated to put the valve in, for example. So yeah, huge big data and really amazing outcomes so far.
Yeah, and speaking of valves, what you've put out so far on Echo side is not only towards the cardiologists themselves there. Edward Life Science also is one of your funders, I believe, in one of your studies. So obviously there's a relationship there too. What are they seeing? And for people that don't know, Edward Life Sciences, one of the biggest heart valve manufacturers in the world, if they may be the biggest multi-billion-dollar company there. But obviously they see something in Echo EIQ that they like. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that relationship? And also, if you could touch on, could that actually help you from a distribution point of view as well?
So I might take the data and leave the distribution to Dion. The way that we first designed there's a clinical study we did here in Australia at St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney and St Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne, and we had a three-way partnership, if you like, from a clinical setting. Edwards Life Science funded the entire project, and EIQ obviously from an artificial intelligence algorithm, and we put the three of us together to try and identify how well we are doing and how well the algorithm could do, and was there concordance or discordance between the artificial intelligence and the clinical human, if you like, doing the analysis. And what we found in that study was that, in fact, we were able to identify 72% more patients using the artificial intelligence than the human alone. And so, as you said, Edwards is a huge company globally. I think they do just under $4 billion in sales for valvular heart disease. And
yes,
it's not really a big secret that valvular heart disease companies and people that make devices make money because there's more devices. And so if you can increase, if you can increase diagnosis by 72%, that's a significant number.
Yes, and then also I think adding on to it, to be fair to people like Edwards, is that as people live longer and longer, there's potentially a need for a second valve at some point too, just because of sheer age, if you will. But Dion, I'm also just curious, from your point of view, the relationship with Edwards, as I said, about distribution, would that potentially help Echo as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It will help Echo. Whether those discussions are where we're heading at the moment with them, potentially not. We are in discussions with 3 of the top 5 valve manufacturers for some kind of agreement at various stages. I think the thing that Edwards and all the valve companies should be commended on is they have now got long-term data to show what the impact is of somebody getting a valve earlier at the right time. And that is exactly what our technology does, right? It identifies the right patient at the right time and they should get a valve. So there's significant upside for any valve company who can use this technology to help qualify the right patient to get the valves for.
Yeah, and also I can't help but bring it back to the human issue, which is that for people, as you get older, this is fantastic news for us because a well-known cardiologist in Melbourne, who will remain nameless, told me that heart disease can be removed by 50% if people would just follow some instructions, and that we are in the golden age right now. So all exciting times here. Now, guys, for either one of you, we have to keep the interview short, but this is truly exciting times. What would be your ideas of success over the next 12 months for Echo EIQ?
Well, I think from an ongoing data perspective and an evolution of our capabilities, the next real big frontier is heart failure. Heart failure is the #1 cause of hospitalization worldwide in the population above the age of 65. So it's a huge, huge behemoth problem that we're struggling to both quantify, characterize, and diagnose accurately worldwide. And we've been working very closely with our colleagues here in Australia, my colleague, Professor David Playford, on building an algorithm that enhances early detection, early warning for this particular disease. And we've had some significant breakthroughs. One of those is that the data has been accepted in the very prestigious European Society of Cardiology's late-breaking science meeting. And that gives us an opportunity to share this data with the world. That's coming up at the end of August, which is really exciting. It's currently under embargo, so I'm not allowed to go through the detail with you. But suffice to say that we're excited about the opportunity to present that. So, moving forward, we've got rapid progression with our FDA projects to make sure that we get the right data to get through that milestone for heart failure as well. And so, 12 to 18 months time, we should be in a very good position to really turbocharge the commercial components of what we're doing there. But in less than a few months time, we'll be in market with our first product and generating revenue. And Dion, maybe you want to elaborate further on that.
Yeah, please.
I'll be quick on that, but absolutely. So what you can expect from a commercial perspective is post FDA clearance and obviously fast tracks commercialization. So you can expect additional partnership agreements being announced. you can expect additional contracts being announced, both in Australia and the US. Core focus is the US. And then, as Professor Strange mentioned, the real icing on the cake is once heart failure comes through, the heart failure reimbursement literally dwarfs what you earn from aortic stenosis. And aortic stenosis in itself is a company maker, but heart failure is just quadruple the reimbursement of what you get for aortic stenosis. So pretty exciting times for all of those. And then obviously some licensing discussions in development as well. So exciting times for us, I believe, at Echo IQ.
Absolutely. Dion, Jeff, thank you so much. We will surely be following this story here.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, Greg.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.